Yes, we need your microphones, please, for the next session. Thank you. So we're going to pause from architecture for now and finish the day off with something a little bit different. We're grateful for Walt Disney Imagineering team, literally from around the world. We've got people from California, from Florida, and from Hong Kong. So I'd like to welcome to the stage Richard Maxfield, Ken Peterson, Robert Braunstein, Bjorn Hervagen, Mindy Wilson, and Mark Schimmer, who's going to moderate his team. Thank you.
And of course, the guy that has to start this off lost his microphone. So, just a quick note: you guys win the award. You have lasted the whole day. Thank you for participating and being here to listen to us today. So, yeah, okay. Well, welcome. My name is Mark Schirmer, and I'll be your moderator today for the panel. I've been with Imagineering for 30 years, and I'm currently the creative executive for Walt Disney Imagineering Asia. I've had the great opportunity to travel and work at all of our Disney parks around the globe. It's a unique opportunity to be able to live and work in these different cultures. I feel it makes me a better designer and able to offer a better product overall. So in the spirit of moving people, we have over 4,000 Imagineers working across 300 creative disciplines throughout the world. Imagineering designs, engineers, and delivers everything from complicated animated figures to the simplest of purchase props, but all to advance the story and enhance the guest experience. So Walt Disney once said, "You can design and create and build the most wonderful place in the world, but it takes people to make that dream a reality." So in a few minutes, you're going to get to hear from a small sample of these creative leaders designing the experiences that will populate our sites over the next decades. And I just want to take a moment and say that our projects truly come to life with the partnership of so many of you in the TEA community. So thank you for all that you do. And at the heart of it all, of course, it's creative storytelling. Something that every project that we begin, it all starts with the story. It's our design mantra. It's the filter that our entire team uses to develop our immersive worlds. But all of the storytelling, needs to work in a massive organization, a very complex organization that we have over 160,000 different cast members worldwide that bring to life all of the magic that you're going to see in a little bit. So before I turn it over to Mindy, our first panelist, let's take a quick look at the video to get a better idea of what we do as Imagineers. Thank you. So we'll let each one of our panelists represent the location they're from, and then we'll actually get down to the Q&A part. Thank you.
I can hear you.
I can hear.
Yeah. Oh, there we go. All right. Here, let me just fix this before we get going here. All right. Okay. There. Thank you for your indulgence. So, as Mark said, I'm Mindy Wilson, and I am the Creative Show Operations Executive for Walt Disney Imagineering. I've been with the company more than 30 years. I started my career at Disneyland. I was a merchandise hostess in Adventureland. I was a snake salesman in front of the Jungle Cruise, so there you have it. So I also spent about 8 or 9 years at Disneyland in various capacities. Most of the time, what I ended up doing was getting all the special projects no one else wanted to touch. If they didn't know how to do it, it came to my door. That was great training for Walt Disney Imagineering. When I joined Imagineering, I was working on projects all over the world, small, large projects, and I did everything from project coordination, show management, I led product lines, and now I'm in the Creative Show Studio leading a global team or working with a global team, the privilege of working with all these gentlemen, to create strategies and plans that really kind of address what our global staffing will be. So we're developing team members all around the world, and that's what you're going to learn about a little bit today. So I want to make sure I do this right. All right. So we're going to give you some idea of what the sheer magnitude of what our scope is, and visit all these projects. These gentlemen will introduce themselves and talk a little bit about what they and their teams are involved in, so you'll see a little bit of what's going on around the world. But before we do that, I want to share some of the statistics that we have. So first off, we have coming up. This is coming up. Now, Mark's already introduced you to what our stable is, but we'll have some things coming up. 19 fully themed lands, 48 attractions, 25 shows, 10 hotels, and 3 new cruise lines. So, you might ask yourself, how do we get all that done? So, in the early days, we did it the way Walt did it. This is Walt Disney testing out the flying saucers. We did this work in Glendale primarily, working with vendors, much as we do today, working with vendors, but in Glendale primarily. So we do mock-ups and first articles to see what it's like from the guest point of view. Some of you may recognize Marty Sklar in one of those previous slides there, or that slide right there. We used to, and still do, create detailed drawings and fully painted models that will serve as a reference for all of our carpenters, our sculptors, and our manufacturing teams. But today we've gone global. So we are now producing our amazing products all over the world with the help of our vendors, as well as with the help of our regional offices. So here we are sharing our talents and growing the capabilities of the people in our local offices. In doing so, we're teaching new Imagineers, and we're also enriching the lives of the Imagineers that we have all over. We're blending the wisdom and the craftsmanship, or the wisdom and the experience of our most seasoned Imagineers with the craftsmanship and the know-how of our local staff. So I'm going to invite Richard up now and we're going to take a trip around the world, and we're going to start that trip in California.
Thank you, Mindy. Hi, I'm Richard Maxfield. I'm the Creative Show Systems Executive based in Glendale, California. I'm going to talk about some of the relentless innovation that we're taking place in California right now with some of our Illusion Studio. But before I do, I thought I would share with you a video of our newest California offering. Some of you may have already seen. Galaxy's Edge transports our cast members and our guests to the planet Batu. The land is absolutely incredible when you have a chance to see it, either in California already or in Orlando at the end of August. I think you'll find it a cinematic experience. Every time you enter a new part of the land, every time you turn a corner or go under an archway, you see almost like a film cut, a new scene, a new sounds, new characters, and it's an absolutely amazing place, and we're all very proud of it. So back here on Earth at WDI, I'd like to talk a little bit of our digital pipeline and some of the things that we're doing in the world of audio animatronic figures. Relentless innovation in figure manufacturing that is conceived and developed at WDI and built at our shops both in California, in Florida, in Shanghai, and with partner vendors around the world, has really lifted the art of audio animatronic animation to a new high. And to build this new generation of figures, we follow a pretty complex digital pipeline. I was interested to see John's map this morning of the process. Our process for simply a animatronic figure is pretty complex. We describe it in terms of like a subway map. Each of the subway lines represents one of the contributing stakeholders to the process, and you can see all the different steps and where the collaboration is needed to achieve some of the amazing animatronics that we're putting together these days. So I next have a little bit of a clip of some of the figure development that is going on, was recently completed in California and is now being installed in Tokyo. As Liana and Jim both said, working with Walt Disney Animation Studios, sometimes Pixar Studios, the folks from Lucasfilm and Marvel, and I guess soon from Fox, we will use, they represent one of the lines on that previous slide of the subway lines because they are very strong collaborators with the rest of the team. The next slide, before I get to the next slide, Jan, you may need to avert your eyes because she's followed you again. The world's most complicated, the most complex, and I would say the most expressive audio animatronic figure. She's often mistaken in this clip for CGI, but this is actually a physical figure. Yep. Yeah, I think that was pretty good. Thank you. That was the Navi Shaman of Song, obviously from Pandora at Disney's Animal Kingdom in Florida. As I said, I think she's the most expressive figure that we've ever created, and the video proves it. Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, some more advancement in our audio animatronics. This is the new A1000 figure. That's been developed for Galaxy's Edge along with several unique aliens and droids. The challenge that we faced with Galaxy's Edge is one that we call D1B2, design once, build twice. We have two of every figure that we've created, one that is installed in California first, and then a couple months later, the doppelganger is installed in Florida. The experience we have in following our digital pipeline as described, when we have developed the animation profile for the first figure, which always takes a ton of time, by the time the second figure comes along, we're able to install that motion profile directly on the figure, and it runs nearly flawlessly. So it's been an excellent success. So I'm going to hand off to my colleague from Florida, Ken Peterson, in just a second, because before I do, because see if you can follow this one, Ken, I would like to share with you a glimpse of one of the newest figures that is currently in development in our studio. Come on.
That's not fair. Yeah. Well, I'm going to be the low-tech version of this presentation, and I'm simply going to say a few words about myself and the Orlando office, and then run through some projects that are coming to Walt Disney World. My name's Ken Peterson, and I am the show studio executive for Walt Disney Imagineering in Florida. I started my career as a consultant with Disney back in 1988, working on projects like Disney's Hollywood Studio, Splash Mountain at the Magic Kingdom, and Blizzard Beach. Fortunately, in 1996, I was able to join as a permanent Imagineer, and I've lived in Florida ever since. So in the last 23 years, I have worked on just about every project that WDI has delivered in Walt Disney World. So here's a couple of the projects that we are going to deliver. We've got about 1,700 hotel rooms in proposed DVC Vacation Club villas. We've got the Disney Skyliner, which is an all-new transportation that will connect multiple parks and the couple of resorts. I'm going to play this. It's going to play for a second, but just ignore that. I'm just trying to get through this. Oh, no, never mind. Works perfect. So Disney Cruise Line is expanding, and we're going to bring 3 new ships scheduled for 21, 22, and 23. We've also got a new NBA experience opening up at Disney Springs. It opens on August 12th of 2019. It's a one-of-a-kind destination developed by Walt Disney Imagineering and the NBA. It's feature hands-on activities that immerse guests in the world of professional basketball. I guess that's fairly timely. And we've got the first ever Mickey-themed ride through an attraction that's coming to the Hollywood Studios. It includes innovative projection effects that truly make you feel like you're in a Mickey Shorts cartoon. Epcot is currently undergoing a major transformation. Imagineers are working to make it more Disney, more family, and more relevant. We've got projects like Remy's Ratatouille Adventure, similar to the popular 4D attraction at Disneyland Paris. And we have a spectacular new nighttime show. I'll stop that. And of course, we had to innovate an entirely new ride system befitting the scale of Guardians of the Galaxy. It'll be one of the world's longest enclosed roller coasters. It's pretty spectacular. The gravity building for Guardians is actually what we refer to as the box that Spaceship Earth came in. It's so large that the Spaceship Earth sphere fits inside. We're also bringing the highly successful. It shouldn't last that long. I'll stop it. We're bringing the highly successful Tron coaster to the Magic Kingdom. So we're looking forward to that. And with that, I will turn it over to Bjorn, and he can tell you about his. Oh, look, he's going to go around behind. Oh, he told you to? I'll cut off in front.
So does the lady in the back translate French? No, okay. So my name is Björn Hervagen, bonjour, and I am the Director of Show Design and Production for WDI at Disneyland Paris. In the spirit of moving people, my presentation is more about my journey through WDI to today and the work that we've been doing in WDI in Paris. I'm going to share with you some of my own personal story and of course some of the amazing things that have just taken place at Disneyland Paris and what the future has in store for us. We recently revitalized the park for the 25th anniversary celebration, and last year we announced a massive expansion of the resort to make the #1 tourist destination in Europe even better. Coincidentally, I've been with the Walt Disney Company for 25 years, working in a variety of different functions, and was fortunate to work on the construction of Euro Disney in '91, working with Imagineers who had moved from Glendale in California to Paris to build that park and open it. After the working in the park, I moved to Disney Cruise Line, where I spent 3.5 years between Venice, Italy, and Orlando, Florida, building the first 2 Disney Cruise Line ships, the Disney Magic and the Disney Wonder. It took a cast of 52 different nationalities coming from all corners of the world to create Disney Cruise Line, which was such a diverse and international mix of interesting and talented individuals. Moving on from Disney Cruise Line, after the launch, I transferred to the Walt Disney Special Events Group in London. My 3 years with the Special Events Group was a great opportunity to travel around Europe, the Middle East and Africa, organizing a variety of events and connecting with so many people within the company. I returned to Paris after Walt Disney Special Events Group as Technical Director for the Disney Village, and after about 8 months I moved once again back to Imagineering for the construction of the Walt Disney Studios. This was an opportunity to build a second theme park, which is kind of rare for any of us to do, and work with some of the former Disney Cruise Line team members that I was with on building this park and who had made the move to France for the park's construction. What's always been very interesting about Imagineering in France is the fact that it's how the projects ramp up and ramp down with the history of the park, and how we've always managed to bring people back together and create teams to create all of these magical experiences in Paris. In 2005, the Walt Disney Studios developed an added capacity program to enlarge the park. We expanded the park with a mini Cars Land, a Nemo ride, and to top it all, Twilight Zone Tower of Terror. Such a huge challenge, but as ever, we were teamed together with various Imagineers who came from across the globe, and with their collective experience and valuable learnings, we made this happen. At the end of Tower of Terror, an opportunity arose for me, and I became the executive producer for The Lion King in Paris. If you're looking for diversity and mobility, The Lion King has it all. A multinational, multi-ethnic cast of 80, 90 local technicians, a 17-piece orchestra, and 2 days a week we had the Lion King School to train young children performers in order that they could participate in the show itself. The success of the show and hard work of the cast, crew, and technicians, similar to the Tony Awards in the US, paid off, and we won 3 Moliere Awards. Following the success of The Lion King, I returned to Imagineering in September of 2009 to look after production and installation for Toy Story Playland, which was then followed on in 2011 as the show design and production manager for Ratatouille the Adventure for its opening in 2014. Partnering with talents in France and California, we bounced across the Atlantic for 3 years to create one of the most amazing attractions at Walt Disney Studios, Ratatouille the Adventure is now the #1 family attraction at Disneyland Paris. Following on from that, and to celebrate the 25th anniversary of Disneyland Paris, we were tasked with the major rehabilitation of the landmark attractions in Disneyland Paris Park. Over the last 3.5 years, our team has pulled together to accomplish some spectacular rehabilitations of legacy attractions such as It's a Small World, Hyperspace Mountain, Star Tours, and the recently opened Phantom Manor. Taking us to today. Here's a great example of how we can take something that is a bit dated and non-IP based and turn it into something new and relevant, is the Hotel New York, which will reopen in 2020 as the Art of Marvel Hotel. Over the next 6 years, we will start to expand the park, as you have heard, with regards to 3 key lands to develop and double the size of the park, which will basically be based off of the Marvel IP, Frozen, and Star Wars. This is through 2025 at the park in Paris. Everything I've shared with you today is only possible through teamwork. As individuals, we can only accomplish so much. Within Imagineering, we move people around from project to project, to and from all corners of the world. We create teams and make each individual a part of that team, and achieving such ambitious goals can only be accomplished by partnering hand in hand with all the various divisions of work that we have within the company. I'm now going to hand this over to Robert Brownstein, who looks after the Asia teams.
谢谢你。女士们、先生们、朋友，我是 Robert Bronstein，韩语名字叫陆총，Disney 亚洲洋区部经总裁 which is tough to say in Chinese, but in English it is I'm the executive for production for Asia, which is Hong Kong, Tokyo, and Shanghai. I think they kept me last because I've been around the longest. I'm the oldest on the panel here, and I've been with the company for 40 years, a little over 40 years. And this is me in 1979 when I started in operations at Walt Disney World as a jungle cruise skipper and a steam train conductor. And on my theme about moving people, I think it's mostly been about moving myself around the world. Back then, as a young, fresh-faced operations manager, it's hard to believe that's me. No, really. I was in Walt Disney World for 16 years, and like most Americans, I was perfectly happy staying in the U.S. until I had an opportunity to move to Paris to work on their expansion in 1995 of what was called their Space Mountain. That was a great year in 1995 for Paris. It turned from Euro Disneyland into Disneyland Paris, and was going through a major expansion. Once Space Mountain opened up, I was asked to join Walt Disney Imagineering, and I moved myself to California, and immediately on my first project was sent back to Florida to work on the Animal Kingdom Park. After finishing up the Animal Kingdom Park, I moved over to California to work on Disney's California Adventure. And that job was so successful for me that the company decided to send me to a deserted island in the China Sea. And at that point, that is the island that did become Hong Kong Disneyland. After Hong Kong Disneyland opened up, I started getting involved with global sourcing here in China and Asia because it was very successful for us to be working in this region. And in the tradition of sending me to giant dirt holes and asking me to make something magical happen, I moved over there. We built our own production center. That was pretty much what the site looked like when I relocated over there. And I would show you pictures of Shanghai Disneyland, but you can just walk outside and see it over there. I was the executive for production for this project over here. And at the end of that project, with properties in Shanghai, Hong Kong, and Tokyo, the company made a very brave decision to decide to put a permanent office here, WDI Asia. And this was our opening team in WDI Asia. I always tell the people, black suit, black suit, black suit, black suit. Robert, black suit. We still keep a very large team in Hong Kong. On the left over there, you can see the team that just opened up our newest attraction, Ant-Man and the Wasp Nano Battle. On the right-hand side, you see our team that is working on the great redo of our castle in that theme park. You'll see a little picture of that a little bit later. And up in Shanghai, we still have a large production team right here. On the left-hand side, you can see the team that put together our Toy Story Land that opened up last year. And then again, in order to build capacity in the company with so much work going on, we decided to put an animatronics studio here. And the team on the right is our animatronics studio right here in Shanghai Disneyland, where we're building not just for Shanghai, for our parks all around the world. And speaking of all around the world, let's start with Tokyo. So what you're seeing here is our expansion, Disney Springs. And Disney Springs will be adding 3 new ports to our Disney Sea area. Fantasy Springs. I'll get it right. You know, I was saying to someone earlier, I know all the Disney internal names that we call them, but I always have to look at the slide to see what we're actually calling it when we open it. Also in Tokyo, soaring around the world, a great attraction. There's a couple of other parks will be opening next month. And in Tokyo Disneyland, as Richard pointed out, we have a major expansion over there. Their Fantasyland expansion with an amazing, truly amazing new Beauty and the Beast ride with animatronics like the company has never produced before. It is truly a groundbreaking attraction for us. That's another picture of the ride. And then in Hong Kong Disneyland, Hong Kong Disneyland is going through a major 5-year expansion. We've just last year opened up our Moana ride. As I just said, we opened up our Ant-Man and the Wasp Nano Battle attraction. And this is a total redo of the castle, a reimagining of what we're calling credible fantasy. The original castle there was a copy of Walt Disney's castle, but we decided it's time to bring a brand new castle to Hong Kong Disneyland. Also coming up in Hong Kong Disneyland, we've also already broken ground for a new Frozen-themed area, Arendelle, which will be opening up in the next few years. And then to Shanghai, where we're standing right now. Shanghai, keeping with our idea of authentically Disney, distinctly Chinese, we recognize Chinese New Year celebration every year. The local folks here have really embraced this park and have made it their own. There was always concern of would people come back a second time, but the the Shanghai public has really embraced this park and are making this park very successful for us. But the newest thing that we're working on right now, will open up in a few years, as Chairman Yao said earlier today, is the Zootopia-themed land, which will be our newest attraction here. This was a phenomenally successful movie for us here in China, and we decided to recognize it with a ride that we think everybody will find really thrilling and attraction, and we'll bring the technology here to get a new state here in Shanghai Disneyland. And with that, I'm going to keep this mic, and I'm going to take my seat, and we will move on to Mark, who will take us into our panel discussion.
Thank you, everybody. Yes, please. So obviously lots of projects, lots of people. I think everyone here has been traveling somewhere. Most of us have lived in different countries. I think no better panel can be assembled, I think, right now to address the idea of global connectivity as well as moving people. We'll let Robert get set up here. All set? Okay. Pay no attention.
You're going to call on me last anyway.
I am. All right. So, Mindy, I'd like to start with you if I can.
Sure.
With Imagineering locations around the world and so many projects, how do you look at resources and kind of optimize your talent?
So, as you know, we all work together very closely. So as we go into annual or twice a year resource planning, which is a monumental task for us, we spend a lot of time talking with one another, and we have casting sessions. So what we're trying to do is not necessarily plug holes on projects. We are trying to cast positions and try to develop our staff. So as we look at that globally, we look at who we have in California that could work with someone in Shanghai or someone in Shanghai that might come to California to work for a while. So our teams are not isolated to their individual locations, but we really do try to blend them. So not only do we blend them across the different regions that we're in, but we also look at seasoned Imagineers working with new Imagineers. How do we motivate the seasoned Imagineer to want to give back and do more? And how do we grow the new Imagineers to have a really solid foundation and be the future of our industry? So.
Thank you. Well said. Bjorn, switching down to you. Disneyland Paris is about to undergo the largest expansion since Disney's studio opened. And I'm curious, how do you prepare for such a thing where it hasn't been that active as far as new big scale projects for you, but now you're really taking on a big endeavor?
We panic. Like airplane. A lot of it is to do with leveraging the collective experience that we have as a company. Mindy and I have been heavily partnering over the last year with regards to that, and as she said about casting, it's about looking at different projects that the company has made, large and small, Hong Kong, Shanghai, pulling off of those experiences and seeing where we can use those experiences with regards to other expansions and adapt them to France, where the way in which we do business can be very different to Hong Kong or Shanghai or an expansion of the Animal Kingdom, for example, and trying to adapt that. We've had a lot of discussions with regards to strategies and discussions and debates with idea sharing, where stuff will work, where stuff won't work. So the strategy that we're putting into place at the moment is a very collective and collaborative strategy, but one which we're trying to adapt in France with regards to the way in which we conduct business, which is very different to the US and very different to Asia.
Thank you. Perfect. And Robert, for you, with the Asia region covering 3 distinctly different locations, Tokyo, Shanghai, and Hong Kong, and different cultures, how do you approach it to try to pull it into a single region that is fulfilling, everything that we want to deliver for our guests?
Well, you can look at it in a number of different ways when you look at 3 regions. You can look at the difficulties between having 3 separate languages, 3 separate regions, people who don't necessarily know each other. But we're looking at it as an opportunity. I think John Lindsay earlier was talking about Epcot Center when we had to hire all those people up for that project. And then when the project was over, there weren't that many projects. You let people go. What we're really trying to do is capitalize here on the fact that we have 3 regions with so much work going on that you can actually balance your workload, move people from place to place. You don't tend to think about what their language is. You think about what their skill set is. Even when we did all our hiring for Shanghai Disneyland, one of the concerns was how would we communicate here? It's such a different culture for us. Hong Kong, of course, people mostly speak English over there. It's very easy for Westerners to get along over there. In Shanghai, we made a very specific decision to say we would not hire based on language. The fact that we did not speak Chinese well and still don't speak Chinese very well was not the issue for Shanghai. That was our issue. We hired people who were good show designers, lighting designers, production designers. It was not about whether they could speak English. And what we were finding is the cultural differences actually just enhance our product. The whole idea of authentically Disney, distinctly Chinese is a perfect example here in Shanghai of how you don't try to change the culture. I mean, we bring something from Disney, of course. Disney is a very large company with a very distinct product, but you look for what you're going to take out of the local region and make them all work together. To that note, when Shanghai Disneyland opened up, and we certainly were going forward with the Toy Story Land project, we didn't have the need for as big a team. We moved some of the team down to Hong Kong, and the folks down there are working in Hong Kong with the team in Hong Kong on the expansion work there. Some of the people, we took the opportunity to send them back to Glendale to work with our most experienced Imagineers to help bring up their skill sets. Excuse me. So you look at how you can leverage talent. You don't think about them different regions and different communities. You look at the talent and how you spread that talent around the company.
Great, perfect, thank you. And Ken, Walt Disney World seems like it's always under constant, innovation and rehabs and upgrades and new projects and all of that. Can you talk a little bit on how you see this new menu being different than, say, ones in the past?
Yeah, historically the menu was such that we could staff regionally and still complete all the work that was being done. This new menu is so expansive that we now have to think globally. So we staff projects globally. We work together, all of us up here. And like Mindy says, we go through resource planning. We make sure that if there's a resource that Florida needs and it might not be in California, it might not be in, we work together. We spend a lot of time collaborating. Sometimes we end up physically moving people around. Sometimes we only do it digitally. We have we're investing in highly collaborative digital workspaces, which allow us to have a very diverse workforce through design, through production, and installation. And this makes our product better because you have different people looking at problems from different viewpoints, all coming up with a better product. So I think that's the way we're going to go forward.
Can I add to that? I mean, one of the things that we're talking about when we talk about regional, and this is something that's happening between Walt Disney World and Shanghai. Shanghai here, we opened up our Tron attraction. It's one of the most popular attractions in the park. When Walt Disney World said they were going to do a Tron attraction in Florida, rather than ignore the fact that we had just one here and just look for their local vendors down there, they called us up and said, you just built one of these. You have very good vendors here in the region. Could you possibly build one for us? And that's exactly what's going on right now is we are actually building all the show sets, all the painted scenery for the Tron attraction right here in the PRC. And we've actually just delivered the first set of show sets to be ready. And then we're going to bring our teams over there who actually install the show here to help assist and train as they start the installations in Florida.
Yeah, and it's going absolutely perfect. I mean, the team in the Magic Kingdom are super, very complimentary of the teams from Shanghai, and the workmanship has been, fantastic. So
Thank you.
It's all working out great.
That's great. And Richard, maybe between yourself and Ken, can you talk a little bit about the idea of Star Wars Galaxy Edge and the idea of double production for two lands that are bi-coastal that way?
Sure. Build once, or design once, build twice. And there was a lot of thought put into how the work was going to be distributed. And obviously, we weren't going to build a set of figures in California for California and then the same set of figures in Florida for Florida. Instead, we had a lot of discussion over what would be manufactured in Florida, what would be manufactured in California, what we would go out of house to manufacture. And this is in terms of figures because there's also a ton of show sets that came to Asia and all over the world, really. That kind of conversation goes on between not only the production leads in the area, but especially the show leads, so the show managers from the projects. It is a collaborative effort, and there's not a set cutoff point either, because some of the figures, Hondo Onaka, our pirate in Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run, make sure I get the name right. Hondo Onaka was largely built in Florida, but not complete. He was sent to us in California, and of course 2 Hondos were built in Florida, and then 2 Hondos were sent to California, and we did the final skin work, figure finishing, and the show programming and animation, which was shown in the video. That was done in our shop in California. And so once Hondo was complete for California, as I said, we loaded files onto the Florida version and then shipped that one to Florida, shipped the one down to Anaheim, and he's on stage every day now. So.
And I think what we're learning is if we can't do it in Florida, but they can do it in California, it makes sense to share that scope, right? We could struggle through in Florida and eventually come up with the right thing, but time and schedule budget don't allow us to ideate here if they've already figured it out there. The same thing goes with show set production, right? We could not have done the scenic elements for Galaxy's Edge if we had gone our traditional route of domestic vendors. Fortunately, the industry was way ahead of us on this, and they're already partnering with global providers, global production houses. So we sort of said, hey, this is something we can do. And now as Robert develops his resources here, we won't need to send art directors and production designers from the States here to buy off scenery. We're supposed to, we're going to get there, and Robert's team can do that. So this is all part of us becoming a more efficient and global,
Yeah, and I'll
enterprise.
just go ahead.
Well, I was going to say also some of the, I'd say the two big projects that are in my shop right now in California are Frozen for Hong Kong and Zootopia for Shanghai. But they're not just in my shop. There's a bunch of Frozen stuff in California. There's Frozen stuff in Shanghai. There's a bunch of Zootopia stuff in Florida, and there's Zootopia stuff. I don't know if you have it yet, but it's destined for Shanghai. So we've really gone through those scopes of work and figured out there's a lot of things to consider. And some of it is about load leveling for our teams to make sure that everyone is busy enough and not crazy busy. So it's very thoughtful about.
And
how
that's
we
where I
do it.
step in, right? I look at the 5 years all the way across and say, where are we going? What are we doing? And what does that talent need to look like so that we don't do what have done in the past, which is staff way up,
Absolutely.
and then have.
We used to call things centers of excellence, right? So we had a center of excellence for animation in Glendale. And over time, we've found that we can have multiple centers of excellence. And that's what we're going to do. Yeah, so we're going to continue to do that.
And
for
I
other
think
things.
that
We
is
have a
kind
universe of excellence.
Yeah.
of
Or the
and that is
galaxy.
that
You
is
might
the
wanna go
long-term
galaxy.
goal, I think. But we also notice, at least I noticed, being based in Hong Kong and also having spent many years in Tokyo, when the local teams get a chance to actually participate in another property's new project development, that is sends the morale through the roof. That's such a big thing, because for so long they feel like they're limited to their one park or their one work that they're tasked with doing. But when they get a chance to work on that global stage, it really sends the morale.
Well, and I think it also helps, as Ken mentioned, that you get different perspectives, right? So something that someone in Florida is looking at, someone in Hong Kong looks at completely differently. And so when you bring them together, you get a much better product.
Absolutely.
And it just strengthens the company. It's exciting for our folks over here. I mean, this is our newest park over here. So our team here is about 5 years old. I mean, we opened up 3 years ago. Most of our team were hired 2 to 3 years ago. So we're handing out our 5-year service awards. We're getting ready to hand out some 10-year service awards for people. But everybody here is very good at implementation. All the designs for Shanghai Disneyland, we hadn't started hiring here yet. That was all done back in the States. So everybody here had that experience of having some very experienced Imagineers come out and work with them and show them how we install, how we program, how we integrate, how we get things ready to open up. But they didn't really have an idea of what the company was. Their version of Walt Disney Imagineering is just what they saw here. Now, as we're sending our folks from Shanghai back to Glendale, and they realize that Glendale isn't a building. Glendale is 3 square blocks of buildings of Disney, and they call me up and they say, "Do you know how big the company is here?" It's like, well, yes, actually, I do know how big the company is over there. But it's exciting because they come back so rejuvenated and feeling like they are part of a bigger organization that's not just about Shanghai Disneyland. It's about being part of that Walt Disney Imagineering team. And we're all saying the same thing, that the way that affects people, if you flash back to when Walt Disney World opened up in '71, there were 2 parks on 2 different coasts, just Disneyland and Disney World. And now you're starting to see that constant interaction, and every culture brings something different to the table.
That's right. So, Richard, you blew us away with some of the cool videos and stuff that you were sharing. We appreciate that. I was just curious, any other initiatives that you and the team are pursuing?
Well, one of the things, one aspect is that subway map, where having recently changed away from the traditional hydraulic actuated figures, all of the figures we're building now are electrically actuated. That goes hand in hand with a digital pipeline, using animation tools and animators from the studio and things like that. So making sure we really understand and can communicate that pipeline and refine it so that we are as efficient as possible. That's really a study that we're doing now. And along with that, we've just launched a new trainee program in the audio animatronics world. It's trying to bring some diversity into our shop. Our shop has great technicians and journeymen, but many of them are I think of about 30 people in the shop, 10 of them have 25 years or more. And so we recognize that, they'll be drifting off soon. And so we need to bring in new talent and make sure that they have enough time with the veterans. So we're developing an exciting trainee program to bring in people from local trade schools and some people possibly veterans who are being discharged from the military, things like that, and get them into the shop and show them that there's a great career in building
great.
those amazing figures.
That's really great. So we've talked a little bit about all of the, I think, kind of positive attributes about going global and what it's meaning for a lot of our people. Let's flip the table. What are some of the challenges by having to look at what we do, not just Glendale-centric anymore, but across the globe? And that's open to any of you guys to jump in.
Well, I would say one of the challenges, aside from that there are 24 hours and we tend to be awake for all of them, but I think one of the challenges that is actually quite positive is that in order to work with different cultures around the world and in order to design for different cultures, we need to learn about them. And so that broadens all of us. But it is a challenge, right? We need to go figure out, what do our guests want? What are the things that our staff need? And how do we motivate them? And how do we find the right people? How do we explain what something is? Like, we know what it is in Glendale, but how do we explain that to someone who's never seen it before in Hong Kong or in France? So.
Exactly. When we came here to Shanghai, and I came here for the first time about 9 years ago, trying to explain what we do. I mean, I am the executive for show production. To almost everybody here in Shanghai, when I said I produced shows, their first thought was singers, dancers, fireworks shows, and that's not what we produce. For show studio, for Imagineering, it is very much hard construction. It is building stuff. So going into the universities here, we did the same thing in Hong Kong 15 years ago. When we went to Hong Kong, went to the local academies, started talking to people about what we wanted to do, going to the professors into these academies and saying, are you willing to put a curriculum out that kind of explains that theme park is actually a career path. It is not just something you do and you go away. It's a career path. I mean, 40 years here. But it is explaining that to people and training people on how we work. Most of our original designers from the park, Disneyland Park, came from the studio. Most of our designers, when we started in Hong Kong, we started here, came from the theater industry, because the theater industry for us is the closest to understanding the storytelling that we're doing here. But as technology keeps on increasing and increasing and increasing, there comes a point where, like we say, we call up Mindy, we call up Rich, and we say, we have some folks we want to send back to you. We're willing to spend the money to put them in your shop for a year, as long as you promise to send them back, and then we can train up. But finding those people who, you're not going to find people who understand how to build animatronics. You're not going to find necessarily someone who knows the difference between a production designer and a show set person, but you can see that spark in people who have that desire to learn, and those are the people you want to have with you that you can train.
Another challenge, is financial. Sometimes there's an investment you make to move people to learn about trades or elements, whether that's from Florida to California or California to Shanghai. That's part of the cost of doing business now, and I think that we're stepping up and we're doing that.
And one is, it's difficult sometimes to be nimble if we're moving people from one region to another. And so we really have to be pre-planning a little better about those moves. Visas are a struggle sometimes, and although we always welcome people that Robert sends from Asia to the U.S., they are welcome. As soon as they come in the door, I say, welcome home, even though it may be the first time they've visited Glendale. But for them to be able to actually go through the process and get approved, especially with some of the recent political climate, the visas are getting tougher and tougher. So we need to know further in advance and be able to commit to those exchanges sooner. So.
And I'd say another challenge in the global world is something that we run into when Bjorn now is working on a Frozen. We just are working on one for Hong Kong. But we have different code requirements, right? So now, as much as we want to share some of that and maybe build simultaneously, we have to be thoughtful about how we're doing that.
Yeah.
So,
Maintaining consistency across the regions.
right,
Which goes back to affecting the design once, build twice thing, right?
right.
Sometimes build twice is really not.
Kind of built
Maybe,
twice.
Build 1.5.
And some art directors, when you tell them you're going to be the art director on a replication of a show, everybody wants to put their touch on it. And sometimes it makes perfect sense for that particular region. But Ken's point is there's a financial point to come to that. I mean, if you're going to change a show, if you do your initial budget saying, this is an exact lift of something we've done before, and then the art director says, yes, but there's this one little thing I want to change, just one, how far does that snowball down, and how much have you kept in your contingency to recognize that each art director approaches it differently for the right reason, because they're the art director in their region and understand their audience.
Yeah. Thanks, Robert. And just remember, your moderator is from the creative side.
and I love all of them.
We're all one big.
But I also
right.
I flash
I
back
didn't
to John
sense that.
Lindsay's talk about at what point is change allowed, or is change?
The McNeary curve or whatever.
Exactly.
What was the,
Exactly. So, hey, Robert, just stick with you for a second. You, I think, probably have done the bulk of some of the travel and relo for the company over your 40 years, and so I'm curious what, not only business trips, but your actual stays in country, the cultures you've kind of become and embraced, come to know and embraced. How does that influence your kind of decision making and looking at hiring people and explaining what the jobs are?
Yeah. I always say the company loves me best when I'm far away, and that's how I feel about it. First of all, I feel very lucky. Very few people are given the opportunity that I've had to pretty much touch all of our theme parks around the world, to live in Paris, to live in Hong Kong, to live in China, to live both at Walt Disney World in Florida and California. And it is a great experience, but it makes you realize what an imposition is on people. When you have people who are picking up their family, and maybe their spouse has a full-time job, and they're trying to make a decision of, this is a great career path for that Imagineer, but what about their spouse who has a job and sometimes a career path of their own, and what is the decision that they make? I think most people will agree, as far as their children, they love the fact that they have an international experience, and children are the ones who adjust the fastest. I'm like, I wish I could speak Chinese as well as some of these 7-year-old children and people around me who come into town and start learning the language, and you just want to go, yeah, thank you, But it is an imposition to people's families, and I think the biggest thing it does for me is it really makes me appreciate. And we work for a company, of course, Disney. We're a big company. We have an entire division of the company that is responsible for nothing more than moving us around the world, taking care of visas, housing, all that stuff. So it is fairly easy for us to move on the technical side, but you really do appreciate what it does to people's families, to understand that it is a big impact to them. And it is, I have a dad who's 95 years old, who's in great health, but he still can't understand why I can't come and see him every other weekend. And he lives in Florida, and I live here in Hong Kong, and it's difficult. So it does give you that perspective for all the people who work for you, that as exciting as it is an impact to people's lives, and you have to respect that. And when people do turn down a job that might be an incredible opportunity for them, you can see the look in their face about that decision of, what is this doing to my career path, but what does it do to keep my family together? And I think it's humbling, when you see that and you understand what it really takes for people to pick up their lives every 3 years and move on a project. Everybody here, by the nature of this audience, does project work. So you all experience this. Probably Disney, just because of the size of the company and the amount of projects we have going on, it's happening more often. But all of you can identify with that when you've been asked to pick up and say, you're perfectly happy in your life in California, but wouldn't you like to go to Hong Kong, or wouldn't you like to go to Paris? I mean, it still is quite an imposition to people.
Yeah.
Because they've met you, Bjorn.
If it weren't for Bjorn, we'd all be in Paris.
But it's interesting, especially coming from the States. I think it's also it's easy to say, yes, we want to send you, and you can talk with the HR and the global mobility teams there. It's also equally important, though, to have a good local or regional or global mobility team to help them once they get there and make sure that things go smoothly. Because usually, once you get there, you're going on a specific date to start that project, so there's not a lot of time usually left to do that. So
Yeah, you and your family arrive on Saturday, and they've got to figure out everything because on Monday you're at work.
absolutely.
Right. But we do try to respect school years and try to make sure that we will look at the financial burden to a project, but still adjust people so they can put their children into the school properly. I mean, that is the most important thing because, when people have their kids, that's what it's about.
That's great.
Which is something that Robert and I
You're speaking to mine.
with a cast member who worked for Robert up until the middle of next month, who is relocating to Paris. So it's all about the shared resources and working with regards to each other on how we want to move people around the world and use their talent. So
Obviously lost control.
Yeah, don't forget, we've got a lot of Florida people that want to live in Paris. So
that as well. And Ken and I work together with regards to moving people too. So
And
I'm
that's
one of 'em.
something that's a little different, right? We've up until fairly recently, most of our relocations have been from a home base to a new project. But with the way we're working today, we're bringing people to the home base in a much more than we had in the past. And in doing so, because of the experiences that everyone has had in living abroad, we recognize that and try to create that support system for them while they're visiting with us wherever we might be.
That's a really excellent point. And you're absolutely right. For years, we always took people from our home offices in the States and sent them someplace else to train. But we are realizing that the long-term benefit is really taking folks from the region where the projects are, sending them back to Glendale or to Florida to work there, and then bring the knowledge back, because then they become a permanent part here and they can continue to impart that knowledge.
yeah.
We're also finding too, that's kind of a one-way street, and it's been interesting being in Hong Kong when the person comes back to their home base in Hong Kong, and all of a sudden there's business travelers coming from Glendale. The Glendale people, and most of them are usually veterans, look at the local place different because they walk a mile in the local shoes, and that's huge, because then that comes back to the home base and gets talked about and recognized. Otherwise, they're literally out on an island.
Yeah.
So that's good. Hey, Ken, I am curious. Walt Disney World, right? Imagineering down there for a long time was really kind of a support system to the Glendale piece of this, and even projects in Walt Disney World were generated, staffed, and many people would go there. And over the years, Florida Imagineering has really risen up to be its own entity and take a leadership role in these projects. Can you just talk a little bit about that change and development?
I think one of the benefits of having such a large resort as a home base is that there's always something going on, whether big or small. And the design services program is a great training ground for creative resources to learn our business. So thankfully, the design services team have been able to grow and then assume leadership roles in the creative positions on projects. We've got a few projects, even for Epcot, that the team was based entirely in Florida. That's a big shift. And so I think it's part of the local design services team as they grow that helps us do that.
That's great.
And we try to bring consistency. That's where the sharing comes across, right? Where we work together a lot. Sometimes we'll move people around to just kind of impart during different phases, like a little bit of new information or updates, so that we don't find that Florida will become its own thing or Asia will become its own thing, but we are still one Imagineering all the way across.
Understood. Great. Thank you. I think we're close to time. We could probably go on
10 minutes.
all night. Are we still have?
We're running a little bit late in general, but
Oh, okay. Okay.
Mark's got a plane to catch, so
Yeah, Mark,
I do, but well, that's good news. I thought we were holding to the 5:30, so hang on. those. So one of the things too that I always wondered about was, Mindy, and maybe this is for you initially, but the leaders in Glendale. So when it's decided that someone's going to relocate and if they've not done this before, how do you manage expectations, and what's that process like to help them kind of cope with this idea? Because I would think immediately they're excited, and then some point reality hits on what this means, and I'm curious what the kind of roller coaster ride is to help them cope.
Yeah, I think, well, Robert mentioned it a little bit, is that decision. Am I going? Am I not going? What's that doing for my career? If I go, what does that mean? If I don't go, what does that mean? And we have a lot of conversations around career aspirations and trajectories and where our opportunities fit into that long term, as well as where those opportunities fit into the family that might be impacted by this. But I think one of the things that isn't ever talked about, and I think really needs to be, we do a nice job, especially on bigger projects, of relocating people and getting them ready and training and language training and culture training and all of those kinds of things. But any of you, and most of you, have been on large projects, and when you complete a large project, there's this whole adrenaline drain that occurs, and then you return from this action-packed decisions every second are important. You come back and we're in concept and we're talking about, well, what if, and maybe it could be, and we're like iterating ourselves in circles, and it's really, really hard on people who've been out in the field, jumping, and then to come back to a much different pace. So when I've been working, like when I came over working with Richard and Robert to visit with our staff in Shanghai during the Shanghai Disneyland project, a lot of my conversations were about what's it going to feel like when you get home. Here are the kinds of things to expect when you get home, so that when they actually got there, because they all came to my office saying, you said this would happen, and here I am, right? So so that when we're trying to kind of do that, a bit of debriefing on the other side. So we do prepare people, cultural lessons and all kinds of things to go where they're going, but we don't always bring them back in the same way, and we're trying really hard to improve on that.
Yeah, and you're right. Probably everybody has experienced it. You really don't experience culture shock when you go to a new country because you expect it to be different. You expect it to be different, another language, different food. What's very strange is when you come to your home country and everything feels so different to you, and you can't understand why. When I returned from France and I'd go and get a Coke and it was full of ice, I was like, oh, ice. I'd forgotten about how much ice in the States. But I mean, simple stuff like that. And just people whose lives have gone on without you. And people always say, well, what was it like living in Shanghai? What was it like living in Hong Kong? And, you can get about 2 or 3 sentences out, and then they kind of go, that's nice, and walk away. And you're like, but it was really cool. And that culture shock of going home is very different. And
yeah. Hey, Bjorn, knowing that Paris, was not the center of expansive new projects and all that, but now it really is becoming that. How do you look at approaching and helping new talent that comes through the door to assimilate and build in, and if there's any training and development that you do uniquely that's Paris?
We've been kind of plodding along with various different things, and that we've become very much in the focus in the last year, definitely with regards to the expansion we're about to have.
Lucky you, I said.
Lucky me. We were flying under the radar, is what we say back in the office, and unfortunately it's like, hi. I'm sending quite a few people from our home office in France over to Glendale for like 2-week periods, 3-week periods. One of the team members has been over for 3 months. Trying to make sure the contact that I've had specifically with Glendale can be transferred over to the team, so that when we have more interaction with Glendale, we're talking apples for apples. There is a Disney language that we use, which is very specific to the company, that WDI, PRC, there's different things that we use that's important for the team as we start interacting more heavily with Glendale, that we can all be talking the same language.
I've put a lot of effort in over the last couple of the months with regards to the whole blue sky schematic feasibility, explaining to the team exactly what that means so that it transfers over. One of the things that we've been doing over the last couple of years with the 25th anniversary is that we've taken on more design in France than would typically be the case, let's say 5 years ago. So there are some divisions of work that we have that we're good to go and we move forward. There are other divisions of work that have to have a higher integration with the teams back in Glendale where the design is coming from, so that we still receive the design and just do the production in France. So there's a development that we are trying to look at in order to develop the talent that we have in France to take on more design. And similarly with regards to the animation section between Robert, Ken, and Richard, there are discussions that we're having on where best to source the animation that we're going to do and increasing the workforce I have in France and their competencies in order to do that. So my team has a huge learning curve in a very short time that needs to happen. And it's only through collaborating with the team that we can do that. And also evaluating risk on, what should we keep in Glendale? What do we think we can handle? And looking at the resources that we can put to it and the skills that they have. So that's kind of where I am at the moment with it.
Great. Thank you for sharing. I think we are down close to time. We might be able to take one, maybe two questions if there is any questions in the audience. There's one center middle.
Just one quick question. How to become an Imagineer? And if the application fails, and what expectations do you have for your vendors?
Well, those were kind of two questions, but we'll kind of go with it. Okay, so what the guidance, and I work with a lot of college students in recruiting and a lot of interns and things. So what we generally guide people who are interested in doing what we do, it's not just being an Imagineer, it's doing what we all do, right? Is to find what you love. Do what you love. Don't go to school to try to become an Imagineer. Go learn about what you love to do. And if you're doing what you love to do and it happens to bring you into this industry, then that's a big win. And if you happen to be at Imagineering, well, then that's great too. So that's really the guidance here. That's how you become a great designer or a great architect or a great storyteller or a great engineer. It's not about becoming a great Imagineer. Yeah. So you become a great Imagineer by being in love with what you do.
Perfect.
From a vendor standpoint, one of the key things that we've did in France over the last couple of years is try and be a lot more collaborative. We know that we had a reputation in Europe with Euro Disney that it wasn't collaborative. So from a vendor standpoint and different discussions I've had with a few different people, companies who are here and in Europe, is it's a collaborative process with regards to vendors. It's the involvement with regards to artisans. I do press interviews and show my hands and say, see these hands? They don't build anything. It's the artisans who build it and the companies with whom we work with. It's developing those relationships with company on a long-term basis. And with regards to doing a collaborative process, we can bring a story. We all can tell stories. We do storytelling, but we have to build it, and we need skilled artisans with whom to do it with and collaborate. That's the important piece. And the passion that they bring as well.
I would just add there's probably no one way that gets you to Imagineering, if that is your goal. And Mindy, I think you said it so well. But if the industry is something you're interested in, we cross-utilize people between so many different players, certainly in this organization, and our vendors, and so if the theme park attraction industry is something you're interested in, that should be something pursuing, not maybe one specific brand or
company,
design house or a company,
Or one specific job. I think so many of us have started one job and gone someplace else. And some people say, "Well, I want to come in because I want to be an art director." Well, that's nice, but a lot of our art directors started as coordinators. I mean, people need to say, if this is really what you want to do, if you really want to join this organization, then you need to, find the right route into the organization, and then once you're in the organization, find your path.
Yeah, I think that's actually a message for, that keeps us here for so long. I don't know what the total number of years is with the company on this panel, but it's quite a bit. But I think it's that fact that we don't follow one particular path. And that's, I think, what we love about this job. And I just stick shout out to our predecessors before. My background, my schooling is landscape architecture. Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, big thank you to Mark and the Imagineering executive team for taking us on a world tour.